Welcome to Show Money, the only show exclusively dedicated to the business of mixed martial arts. I'm Paul Gift, the economist. As always, I'm joined by Jason Cruz, our lawyer, and John Nash, the man who knows everyone and everything in mixed martial arts. We have one topic today, and that is the Professional Fighters Association, the group that came out about a week and a half ago saying that they want to organize UFC fighters into a union. And they held a press conference on Thursday. We are filming this on Sunday, August 21st. They held a press conference on Thursday where the man who is leading the charge for them, Jeff Boris, gave a little bit of a speech and had some question and answer session. So first question to you guys. Jason, what was your first impression of the Professional Fighters Association? What stood out to you when you saw read their introductory press release, and then you saw that press conference the other day?
I think it's very professional what they're doing, and I think that the presentation obviously lends itself to think that they have some collateral or something to give to the fighters. You look at the website, you see the quotes, however vague or whatnot it may be, from the other players associations, from the NFL, NBA, NHL, those types of things. You kind of get that feeling, the inference that they are a very professional organization and can assist the fighters. I think one of the interesting things that I pulled from the press conference on Thursday was the Jeff Boris out there talking immediately about how he attempted to go to a media day for the UFC, how he attempted to do a professional thing by trying to text Ari Emanuel and Dana White, and immediately getting that tension with those guys, discussing how they've been thrown out of those. He was told to leave the UFC media day or whatever event it was. I think that kind of garners a little bit of showing that they're on the fighter's side, basically, that they are willing to fight for the fighters. One of the things that came out is that that Boris and probably the PFA think that that the fighters are being bullied around, and they want to assist them in that way. So I think that's an interesting take. Whether or not the actual logistics of it happen will be something to take account for in the future.
Yeah. And we'll be talking about that later. John, we know you have a particularly, well, you have a strong take on everything, but
how dare you? I'm offended by your insinuation. No,
all right, John, what did you take away?
I guess it's been a process, and several we'll get into later. What my original impression is, my later impression. I'd actually been told, I guess, probably a week or two before it happened, that this was that Jeff Boris was going to get involved in a fighter association. I thought, oh, it's another, because so many people have been talking about starting fighter association. I didn't think it would make that big a splash. I didn't think that'd be that big a deal. So I was very surprised at how much press and attention their newsletter got, and not their news, but their press release and just their announcement. Because it was just an announcement. We've seen, the culinary union last year made the same thing, and it didn't make that big a splash. Everybody went very excited that they made this announcement. They had some, I guess, some pretty respectable names attached. Lucas Middlebrook, Andrew Zimbalist, who's a great sports economist. So they had some big names, so I could see some of that. And they also had some endorsements by a bunch of players' associations, which I guess got a big reaction from a lot of people. The thing about those endorsements is I almost got the exact same quotes a year ago when I was calling, and I didn't print them because I was calling about the MMAFA, and I started noticing that no one was really endorsing the MMAFA. They were endorsing the concept of organizing. So I called the Major League Baseball Association, I called the NFLPA, and again I got the same response, that really we weren't endorsing the PFA, we were endorsing the concept of fighters organizing. But that was genius of the PFA to get these quotes, these endorsements, and put it on their release. So my reaction was, it's a very good, I would say very good PR so far. They've done a very good job of the PR push on their front of making a splash. We'll probably get in later, but there's stuff when I called labor lawyers and labor organizers, union organizers, there's certain things they've done that they are probably not the proper steps you do when organizing a union, And so I start wondering if they are as familiar with organizing as they present themselves to be, or is this something that they came up with without any clear concept? I guess there's a lot of questions to go forward. But that was my original take was a lot of confusion, to tell you the truth.
So you knew it was coming, but you didn't know it was going to be a union.
I didn't know for sure. I was told that he was going to do it. I get told a lot of stuff, and it ends up not being true. So, but I didn't think it was going to be a union. I thought it'd be an association again because of the employee status. And that's the big chunk is that the big shock for me is they're going right away. They're claiming right away that they're going to be employees, not independent contractors. They're not even messing with independent contractors.
And that is the big thing, right? Just to make sure everybody knows, we've talked about this a bunch of times in the past, but when you're independent contractors, you can form an association, but you can't form a union because you're effectively a cartel or colluding, even though it's over your own pay. But there's a special exemption or exception for employees to do that. And so that's kind of what this is going to be about. So the process, we should talk a little bit about the process going forward. Jason, do you wanna fill us in on some of that? What you expect to happen, being our lawyer?
Yeah. So basically, from what Lucas Middlebrook had explained, is that they'll have to obtain 30% of the fighters to sign on with these cards with NLRB, and then from there, I believe it's the fill me in if I stumble here, but it's the NLRB that will be conducting a vote among the 600 or so UFC contracted fighters, and then it will be 50%, if I'm correct, of the vote will have to vote for the organization.
That's 100% right. Just to be clear, because I'm sure a lot of people are listening is wondering what the heck we're talking about. The NLRB is the National Labor Relations Board. It's a government body put in place to handle labor management issues. It's a New Deal program started by the Roosevelt back, I think, in '33 or something like that, way back in the New Deal era. But their job is to handle specifically just unions and labor organizations and how they deal with how businesses deal with them. So anybody got confused by that? I just thought I would add that.
And let me add one other thing. This is from the NLRB representation case procedure changes they made in 2015. It says issues as to whether employees or individuals are employees within the meaning of section whatever must be litigated at the initial hearing if they involve the entire unit. These include determinations of whether individuals are statutory employees or independent contractors. So right when we get to that first hearing with the NLRB, it looks like the UFC is going to have to raise this issue, and it's going to be, of course, the key issue in the whole entire case. I mean, other than getting the necessary votes.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the first thing that the PFA's got a big task ahead of them because people think it's very simple to organize unions. It's very, very difficult to organize unions, especially now because there's less labor protections. We've cut a lot of them out. But businesses have mastered the art of disinformation, of slowing. Discrediting the labor, the unions, of doing all these tactics that there's guys that now are hired to be advisors on this and how to prevent unions from forming. So the UFC's, I'm sure they actually probably had some on board before because of because station casinos, I'm sure had them, and now they maybe just hand those guys over to the new owners. So that's one step. The second is they got to first get 30% of all the fighters to sign on their authorization cards to say they want a union. That's going to be really hard when you have 600 fighters spread across multiple countries and only some of them are permitted to form a union in the United States. And on top of that, 20% of the roster, 25% changes every year due to firings and hirings because they cut so many guys. So that's a huge task they're looking at.
So basically, 180 fighters will have to sign on, and as John points out, I think that there's an issue, especially when you're dealing with an international base of fighters, to explain what's going on. I think that's one of the obstacles for the PFA, and then just to get 180 fighters to go ahead and sign on with this would be really hard. And then if you even go through there, you're going to have to get 120 more, so at least 300 or more to agree to the union. So it's a very hard to do. We'll see how it goes, how they go about trying to recruit people.
Yeah, and my understanding is this doesn't have to be every time, but a lot of times they don't even like officially filing the cards at 30%. They usually want to get over 50% just to make a strong showing, preferably 60 or more, right? And so it's probably not just going to be that 180. I mean, maybe if they have trouble getting more, they would file it there anyway. But go ahead.
Yeah, and Jeff said they didn't want to go forward until they got like 95%.
Oh,
It was super strong. And I'm like, there's no way you're getting 95%. I don't know if you've talked to enough fighters. There's no way you're going to get that high. Just because the confusion factor, the people all over the country, people going in and out, people getting cut, people terrified of losing their discretionary bonuses. If you're really honestly thinking of doing this, you got to shoot a little lower than that. Bill.
Well, that was my main impression from the press conference. Yeah. It's just the way. I mean, and it's understandable why they did this because they're out there trying to promote their organization and get people interested and want to sign up, but they just made everything seem like it's going to be so easy. And like Middlebrook, the question was about the possibility of going to court, right? It was, oh, well, I guess I'd have some pro bono work ahead of me. And it's like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, you're going to have a lot of pro bono work ahead of you if this thing moves forward. I cannot see there not being a huge fight. And just to give people some perspective here, the FedEx decision that Middlebrook talked about from the NLRB in 2014, that case started in 2006. The regional director of the NLRB made a ruling in 2006. It finally, I mean, a lot of things happened, and by no means am I saying the UFC situation will be the same, but they got a full board ruling in 2014. That case is still going on right now because FedEx is still fighting it, and it's in D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and there is scheduled for oral arguments in September. So it's been 10 years. There could potentially be a lot of fighting ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so one thing I didn't point out is that the UFC could make a legal challenge to the NLRB ruling, and that's when it goes to a court, U.S. Court of Appeal, federal court, and it could go. I mean, the appeals process could go all the way up to the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court decides to take it. But yes, it's really. I mean, once it matriculates through the federal court system, it could take years upon years.
I know we have new owners now. But does the UFC have a history of fighting? Let's see, Randy Couture, J.D. Penn, the antitrust case, New York. The new owner hung up on you, possibly, right?
Yeah. Well, to be fair to the owners, they should have hung up on them because technically, and you were looking up about how labor, organizations are supposed to work. You shouldn't accept any phone call from someone representing people they don't represent yet.
That's a good point.
And that was, they actually technically the UFC. I think speaking of labor lawyer, and I don't want to actually get this wrong. I might be wrong, but I remember him saying something that he could have been in trouble if he started negotiating with someone that doesn't actually represent the fighters of ours. So that might have been just him being smart. Like, I'm not dealing with you because that's even worse than me dealing with you.
And realistically, that could be that could have been the response Boris wanted. He wanted to have it on the record that he could say that, oh well, Ari Emanuel hung up on me, or Dana White didn't return my call, just so to place him in a better light to maybe the prospective fighters they're going to recruit.
Yeah, well, like I said, they've been very good at PR so far. It's a very good. They've made a good PR push in front of everybody so far. Which is, which I'm sure is, they're getting a lot of media attention, which is what they want. So, but there is one, the one conspiracy theory that people have, and I don't know if it's true, is there's also the possibility they go to the UFC and say, hey, don't fight us on employees and unions, because we will negotiate and settle for, a small amount, just to, if you have a union, you basically kill your problems with the antitrust lawsuit and the Ali Act. So they have that leverage they can come forward and say, too.
And so we should clear up. It probably doesn't make the current antitrust lawsuit go away because that's about the past.
Yeah.
But you're talking about going forward.
Yeah, yeah. If people don't know, okay, there's the other group, the MMAFA, that they're following the old NFLPA playbook, and they're the ones behind the lawsuit, the antitrust lawsuit against the UFC, and they're also trying to lobby to get the Ali Act passed. So we'll get into that later. But with the PFA around, if they become a union and they sign a collective bargaining agreement, well, according to the 1987 court ruling with the NFL, you cannot sue for federal antitrust violations as players if you have a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement. And so that would prevent any future damages, any future suits from now on. So the current suit would exist, but the damages would freeze the day that the CBA went in. And in 5 years from now, the fighters couldn't sue again because they had a collective bargaining agreement. So that would eliminate antitrust problems. So they get rid of that. They basically cement the UFC as a monopoly. And Representative Mullen said that if the UFC becomes a real league, he wouldn't worry about the Ali Act. Well, guess what? That would get rid of the Ali Act right then, too. So that's one thing that they could go to the UFC and say, listen, you want us because, we eliminate all your problems. In which case, then there comes a question, are you really a union? Or if they did that, then there's a question, are you a yellow union, which means a company union? Are you really working for the fighters of the union? But that's just me putting on my tinfoil conspiracy hat that I like to do sometimes. Doesn't mean any of that's true. I'm just saying that's something to think about.
What do you think about Scott Boris's association with the union? I mean, he isn't. So the MMAFA likes to point out that he's an agent, right? And it's good. It's entertaining to see them go back and forth and attack each other. But
yeah, we don't have the old Pride UFC rivalry we can talk about, or even UFC Strikeforce. That's all dead. Now we got MFA, PFA. That's our entertainment now. We got a labor feud to keep us preoccupied. I mean, they make something of a point. He's the one Bagali Group, which has Lloyd Pearson, who represents Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz, and there is under labor law, there's a conflict of interest ruling that says you can't have an interest in your employees if you're going to be a labor organizer or work for a labor organization. But I mean, he's separate enough. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, none of the guys I spoke to thought that would be a problem, but it raises awareness. They said it's something to be brought up. But I think the MMAFA makes it a bigger. I can understand the MMAFA's their fear of the PFA because, just as we said with the antitrust, this basically kills anything the MMAFA is doing. It's as much as the PFA claims they can work together, they really can't. They're complete opposite ends of the spectrum of what they're trying to do. But I also think the MMAFA guys, they're such. How do I put this in a way that there's a lot of them have, I think, jumped to the conclusion that if you're not with them, you're working with UFC, which is not true. You could be, they could be working against you and not be working with UFC. There's a spectrum of the thing. It's not a Manichean battle going on in the world.
Yeah, Jason, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I first of all, I think it was Jeff. I think you might have said Scott, but
did I?
That's okay. I mean, baseball agent, Scott Boras, Jeff Boras, same thing. I just think that
to the Borises.
The Boras. I think that realistically, there probably is not an issue. I think that it may be beneficial in a way, since that Boris, he presents himself well and knows the ins and outs of working with other top level executives in other sports. Obviously, working with against like the UFC or working, I guess you could say against right now, the UFC with Dana White or Ari Emanuel is a different beast altogether. But I don't think he's the type. He's done really big deals, aggressive, contentious deals. I would assume, and so I don't think that he would back down as the leader of the PFA if they do organize the fighters. So I think he presents himself well. I just I don't know how big the conflict will be. Although obviously, if you're the AFA, that's something you would want to branch out there and talk about, because is he really is this really a fighters union for fighters or something else?
Right, yeah, and he likes to talk about the executive board, but I mean, so I've been on I've been on record saying that I don't think the antitrust lawsuit is terribly strong, and I think we all agree that as it's currently drafted, the MMA Ali Act probably wouldn't change too terribly much. So it seems like this is, and I thought the big issue for fighters and getting paid would be to finally be determined employees, if that can happen. It's a big if. But I always think about their incentives, right? And so I'm like, it was always who's going to bring that lawsuit, and there's no money behind it. But now we kind of see the way that maybe there is something behind it, because Middlebrook seems to be working for free now, but you know that eventually, if and when they become a union, he would want to be their legal counsel probably. It feels like Jeff Boris would want to be the executive director and get paid there, and then you have his agency that might start representing more fighters, and if they can get higher pay, you get a higher cut. So it seems like and we don't know why the Economist is doing it, but he seems to be more of a side deal. It seems to be like we've got an answer as to who might bring this, right? The question was who is the challenge independent contractor status. There didn't seem to be money in it, and it seems like this is the way it might happen, and the way people might be getting compensated in the future out of it. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure, but at least we kind of have an answer.
But I'm different than you. I don't think the employee status is going to lead to the big pay raises.
Right, we have a difference of opinion on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're wrong, but that's all right. No, but we all admit that the secret of sports, the secret of money in sports is competition. Is when they lost the right to when they could stop retraining, when first you had leagues like the ABA and the USFL when there were multiple leagues, but also when the reserve clause was eliminated and players could move around within a league, that's when pay skyrocketed. It had, well, we don't have multiple teams in the UFC. It's one team. And so, okay, great, you're an employee and you'll get some benefits, and that's a positive, especially for the vast majority of fighters are at the bottom of the UFC pay scale. But the guys that are looking for big paydays, that comes from competition. And there's no competition. This isn't going to create competition. This is,
So I agree with you there. Competition is a big thing, but competition works both ways. Laborers compete, or people compete to provide their services. So you've got independent contractors competing to provide their services, and when you organize, that competition goes away as well. So that, I mean, and you.
But okay, let's say we organize. We're the PFA. We get the fighters together. We make a union, and we show up to the UFC, and we say, we want to organize." The UFC goes, "Okay, we're going to give you, like we talked about this earlier, we're going to give everybody a $10,000 raise, and we're going to give you full insurance." And guess what? The vast majority of your fighters are going to vote for that, and they're going to be ecstatic. We just got a big pay raise, and we just got benefits. That's a huge win for most fighters. Well, who's the big losers? Is the top 100 guys that probably think they should be making 3, 4, 5 times what they're making right now. So, yeah, you can collectively bargain and get something, but the UFC gives up what? We gave up $20 million of revenue when we're now making $700-800 million nowadays. It's not much for the UFC to give up, to give in on those things. That's what I'm saying. If people expect this to lead to like big time sports salaries or big time, the big time what you see in other sports, I don't see it happening that way. Because I don't think you can collectively bargain against a single entity monopoly.
Yeah, they shouldn't think that. And then my perspective is the antitrust lawsuit I don't think is going to yield very much at all, probably. The MMA Ali Act, probably not much there either. So this seems to be something, and it's a start. And you start with maybe a CBA like that, and then what's the next one? And then what's the one after that?
Well,
and then the one after that.
The next one is when the union falls apart. Because that almost happened to the NFL. Because the union wasn't doing anything in the 70s. Remember, they started making success, but members stopped paying their dues. They gave up. They quit the union because they thought they weren't getting anything out of it. And that's but again, we get back to in a weird way though, the antitrust lawsuit I think is actually done what kind of the intent of it is. And the intent is, it's to win huge money for the fighters, but I think that's the mistake. If you're looking at it from an association, what the NFL used to do, the intent was to stop behavior. And we've talked about before, if you look at how the UFC used to act with fighters, they would freeze them for beyond their contract terms with the tolling provisions. That seems to have stopped. They used to keep guys locked into contracts after they quit fighting for the UFC for years. Heath Herring was kept under contract for years. Guess what? Kong Lee was released. Vanderlei Silva was released. Guys that sit out a year, the UFC ends up releasing now. So this wave of people testing the free market to test Bellator, which I don't really consider true competition because they're so much smaller than the World Series of Fighting. Come on, they make $30 million combined probably compared to the UFC's 600. What can they offer? But it's something a little bit. And would fighters be able to test? Would we see so many fighters testing the market the last 2 years if that antitrust lawsuit was filed? I don't know. I mean, it is remarkable that the behavior they charged the UFC stopped. Not that the UFC would have lost the suit, but that their lawyers were telling them, why do this when you don't have to?
Jason, jump on in here.
You guys are making some great points, and I do agree. I think that this is the PFA is probably the closest thing to. Sorry, MMAFA, but it's the closest thing to helping fighters in a long time. I'm not. I mean, as we previously talked about, I'm not that bullish on the results of an antitrust lawsuit. Although things, who knows what can happen in discovery and whatnot. I'm not too bullish on the Ali Act as it's presently. As it's presently written for MMA fighters, but I do think that if there is something to be taken here, from the PFA, if at all there is some discussion amongst the new owners to do something for the fighters, throw them a bone or whatnot, that could facilitate some discussion. But I do. I mean, if you get to the point where they do get their 180 fighters or whatever fighters to do a vote. You could see more people. I would suggest you could see more fighters, assuming it's a confidential vote, would side with a union. Again, one of the other things that we don't know about, and which you guys alluded to, is like, how are they actually monetizing this? How will the PFA monetizing this? Is it dues? I mean, how much will the dues be? I pay dues myself for associations as a lawyer, and I know a lot of times I look at my bill for like $500 a year or whatever, $600, and they go up per year. How much will fighters be agreeable to that? And then you ask yourself, as a person who's a part of the association, what are they doing for me? If you're not one of the 10 and 10 people, if you're like middle of the road, happy with, like Donald Cerrone just gave an interview with MMA Fighting saying he's entering free agency, but he's not looking anywhere else because UFC is his home. If they're content, those are the kind of the fighters that you kind of wonder about. Are you able to sway those fighters to an association? Maybe not Cerrone specifically, but you know what I mean. The middle class of the MMA UFC fighters.
Yeah, and just in terms of this vote, that's actually where the pay distribution might come back to bite them, right? Because there's not a lot of Donald Cerrones out there. Again, we're not arguing over the effects of the union or anything, but just the pay distribution is a ton of people making really low money. I mean, I consider it really low money, right? And then it just gets lower and lower and lower and lower, and a few people in the extreme making a ton. So you've got a lot more of those, but 10, 10, 20, and 20 type people. But who knows? Who knows?
And people always argue too that you need the top guys to form a union or association. You need the top guys. I don't. If you look at the method of organizing for the union, PFA, I don't see the top guys getting the reward that would make them very enthusiastic about it. Again, you need competition. If you took if there was another UFC out there, right, or even half as big as the UFC, could do half as much money putting on Diaz McGregor. Well, how much more money would they make? Because I mean, we kind of know what the UFC pays those guys. We kind of know what at least based on their books, we know what the percentage of profits are. It's like 60, 70% margins on those. You could double the pay of those two, what they get. and still be able to put on a show, even if you did half as good as UFC. That's where the big guys are gonna. That's why they're gonna want competition. I don't see, if they're gonna. It'd be bizarre if you end up with a split where like the majority of fighters are joining a union because they want to increase those minimums, and the top guys are not because they're like, well, this doesn't do much for me.
when we get off air, John's gonna go shed some tears, be like, Pride, Strike Force.
Yeah.
I miss you guys.
Well, that was my favorite. That was my favorite period. Two different. Well, not Strike Force, but Pride and UFC. In the ring in a cage. It was glorious. It was a glorious time. Well, I mean, the fighters should be. We've talked about this before. I think everything's a failure because you guys blew it. 2008 was the time to do this. Before you gave up your image rights, before you gave up your merch rights, before the last competitor Strike Force went under. This would have been the year that would have been the time to do it. And now it's like, well, you're shuffling, chairs on the Titanic's deck. It's over for you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't force competition. You can't force competition. And I mean, an antitrust lawsuit can try to do it, but I don't expect much from it. And you can't just artificially create a competitor. So is a union better? Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, that's the that's the one thing. The part everybody's going to hate, and again, people will hate it because the Ali Act part is the part that they want to push through for the MMAFA. What's strange about that is that's going to be something that fans will hate, and boxing, ABC never enforces it. But again, their whole plan, and they won't say it, and I guess I don't know why they won't say it, but the plan obviously is they want to have it for the association to use. That's their plan is that, hey, if we have an association, we'll sue on behalf of the fighters, and it'll be enforced all the time for our members, which is an incentive to join the association because we ain't going to go out and sue anybody on your behalf. You have to be an association member. Right. So, but fans will probably hate that because they'll hate the idea of, non-UFC and Bellator belts.
Yeah, well, they talk about it creating more competition, and my read of it, I just flat don't see it. I don't know about you guys, but so that's why I just dismiss it. But that's just me.
Well, I mean, the competition it would create is, a fighter could go out on his own and put on his own show.
That's what they claim. I don't quite see it.
Yeah. I agree, Paul.
I don't know. I mean, you don't think? If Conor and Nate Diaz could get out and put on a show, it could do half the business of the UFC, probably, wouldn't you think? It wouldn't do as much as the UFC business, but.
Well, didn't the Diaz brothers put on a show of their own, like once in Stockton, like a half amateur, half pro?
But with who? Who's on that show? That's the question.
It was Nick is the owner, biggest draw.
Yeah, that's a huge draw. The owner. I mean, that doesn't make. That's the question of competition is the idea of that you have big name fighters, the top guys. If you, I mean. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's too late. Maybe the UFC brand is that strong. But if you gave me, GSP, McGregor, Nate Diaz, and Cerrone, do you think we could, someone could make money with those fights somewhere?
That's a really damn good start.
It reminds me what you're depicting. It reminds me of when the ice skaters would go on the Champions on Ice tour, like they just come out on their own tour, after the Winter Olympics was over or something like that. It reminds me, it would be similar where you just have this independent group of people conducting their own card. I mean, I don't know if I envision that, happening, but I don't know.
Yeah, what I'm saying is it's what every fan doesn't want. It's the boxing model.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. But that's what I'm saying. That they're shooting. I would think it would work because there's money in boxing, and it does. And boxing doesn't make as much money as MMA. People don't realize that. Boxing, the HBO Showtime deals, they're less than what UFC makes on Fox. The pay-per-views, except for the big, Mayweather-Pac fight, the one fluke, they do less on pay-per-view every year. There's no revenue for boxing promoters from video games and toys and stuff like that. UFC makes more money than all the major North American promoters put together in boxing. Yet boxing pays more. Why? Because shit like that. They can compete, and that's what they're shooting for, and that's what fans will hate, and so no one will want it, but I'm just saying. My pessimism came back.
There are no purse bids. Yeah.
Well, it's not just purse bids. You can go down the line. There's just a bunch of reasons. There's just no value in it. There's no value in MMA fighters. There really isn't. There's no value in building one up.
We haven't had a good rant in a while, have we?
That was it.
I don't know. All right. So what do you think? We're getting. I think we're getting a little short on time. I think we're trying to keep this at 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
What do you think going forward? What do you think the next big steps are going forward, or what concerns do you have going forward? Something about going forward. What do you think?
I'll go first. I'd like to see how the timeline goes. So for PFA, it seems as though they came out wanting to do this having this momentum. They pinned their launch around this event, UFC 202, and they did the press release, they did the media tour, they did the big press conference on Thursday. So I'd like to see how it builds from there. Are they actively recruiting fighters and trying to have them sign on with these cards? And from the UFC perspective, I know Dana White doesn't know. He kind of gave that little whatever's going on. Doesn't know about the union when at that press conference. What will the UFC do, if anything, to behind the scenes deal with a situation? We'll see. Obviously there are rules against the UFC trying to prevent these types of votes. We'll see what happens. How much loyalty do the UFC fighters, the contracted UFC fighters, have to the UFC, and how much do the UFC fighters trust PFA or are influenced by PFA as far as going forward and signing on? And then from the other perspective, what is MMAFA going to be doing? Will they be doing something proactive in relation to what PFA is moving in on basically their territory?
Any guesses on how they'll respond? I mean, we've seen how they respond a little bit, but any guesses on any action they might take?
What are you talking about, UFC?
MMAFA.
Oh, I don't know what actually they could be doing. I know they did Leslie Smith made her story about the removing the tumor kind of helped with recognize some issues regarding insurance. I don't know unless they also are on the road of recruiting other fighters to kind of step forward for the MMAFA, and also having people just educating them on the differences between the two organizations, PFA and MMAFA. That's what I think that they can do from here.
John, you told us UFC fighters blew it in 2008, but what about going forward now? What big questions do you have, or what stands out to you? What do you think is going on?
Well, I think they should join my association that I'm starting. I'll be the leader of it, and you guys can send me your dues. Going forward, I don't know. I mean, I'm pessimistic because I think it's a lot. I talked to a lot of labor, not a lot. I talked to 3 guys who are labor organizers and lawyers. I can't lie, it wasn't a lot, but 3 guys this week, and I'm very pessimistic about their chances based on my conversations, because they described how hard it is to organize, and they thought the PFA was making mistakes. We talked about this. I think you had that list of things you're supposed to do as an organization, and they came out before they had. They came out on behalf of the workers instead of having the workers organize first. So they're doing stuff that I guess technically are mistakes. So that makes me a little pessimistic, because I think they might have thought they might be thinking this is easier than it really is. That's the vibe I'm getting right now. So I'm a little pessimist about PFA, although they are getting a lot of press, and I'm a little, it's amazing too. As soon as the UFC announced their sales, how much the media, MMA media, is covering this stuff. A year ago, you remember the guys were hanging out with the NFLPA, and no one covered that.
Yeah.
Right.
Like no one, and you think that compared to this, that was like even sexier. There was actual, they weren't revealed, but there were actual members of the UFC current roster there who, were anonymous, but they were there, and no one covered that. And this is like, oh, we had an announcement. This is great. We're gonna have a union now. The sale does that, I guess. But going forward, I'm a little pessimist about that. The MMAFA, I'm also I got to be pessimist about them because if the PFA comes into, they basically, you can't have two labor organizations, what they're trying to do. If the PFA comes by and makes something just for UFC fighters, that basically eliminates what the MMA FA is trying to do, and so they lose all their power. They'll have fighters outside the UFC, but there's very little you can do without the 800-pound gorilla. So I guess I'm as usual, I'm pessimistic, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, talk about good timing for them. You had the sale, right? And then late last year, Middlebrook really enhanced his profile in the industry with the Nick Diaz case.
Yep.
Having him on there after he gets, I don't know, we'll call him quote unquote famous in our industry, right? And then bring in the name Boris, whatever Boris, I don't know that.
Jeff Boris, not Scott.
Everyone.
Oh man, if they had Scott Boris, wow, that's nuts.
He's going to negotiate at least a couple million for him.
Just bring in A-Rod. A-Rod's your executive director. He's not doing it.
But yeah, they
had a drug test.
Big change. I mean, what's? I think this is why the MMA FA is in trouble. I think too is that they came out almost too early. I think because they came out when the UFC had a lot of goodwill before people knew how much the UFC. I mean, obviously, when people realized the last year and a half how much money the UFC is making, that's changed people's opinion of the equation of fighter versus employee, battle. More people are sympathetic to the fighters now than they were 2 years ago. And the problem with the MMA FA, they started before this, so they're the guys that are attacking the UFC. They're unpopular. And the first fighters that were willing to go public, the only fighters that would speak on the record publicly were obviously the guys on the outs with the UFC. And so they're stuck with, oh, you're the disgruntled guys trying to bring down the UFC. And I don't think they can't fix that. That's the image they're stuck with. Right. Because they came out before everybody else. If they hadn't gone public until now, people's opinion might be completely different.
Yeah, you make a really good point.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated to see the. I almost hope they get 30% vote just so that we can see the employee independent contractor thing go to battle.
The UFC would wait till the 50% vote, wouldn't they? Well, I guess you'd have to be right. The vote would 30. Yeah, they'd have to have the vote. But the big fear too, though, if they fail on their vote.
Right.
Not just on they fail on getting employees stat. Well, first, what's the plan for the PFA if they fail to become employees? But if they fail to get the 50% vote, then you've killed the unionization for a while. And here's the weird thing too. Throw a curveball. If they get a vote, someone else can jump on there and ask for you to vote for them instead.
Yeah, MMA.
Yeah, well, MMA or another union could pop out of nowhere. The William Morris Agency union there could be a third union, second or third union on the vote. So you could do all this work. The PFA could do all this work, and someone else could end up being the union.
So I think
we're the FA thinks.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the MFA doesn't want a union right now, so that would be weird.
Oh, I'm just talking about doing all the legwork and then all.
Oh yeah. They'd be like, "Welcome to our club, jackasses." The two of them, that'd be hilarious. The two of them are sitting on the outside, the guys that did all the work, and that one group from New York that were trying to organize guys. They come out of nowhere and they get it.
So basically, it ain't gonna be as easy as it seemed in that press conference, where it's like, oh, we'll get the vote, and then hopefully they'll just recognize us right when we get our 30%. Like, yeah, I don't think that's happening, guys.
Yeah, that's wishful thinking.
Yeah, promoting. I call it promoting. Yeah. But who knows? All right, anything else? Anything else you guys want to add? Anything else we missed or didn't think of?
No, we're all a little hungover from yesterday's fight, so it's a little hard to.
So things pretty kick-ass there.
I think that's it. Next time we'll talk about the Writers Association that we're supposed to kick.
To the BE brass, you didn't hear that from me. That was John.
Yeah.
I'm setting up my own union.
Jason.
I could collaborate myself. Someone has to oust me. They're gonna have to just shut down the domain. That's all. I have threatened to sell it on multiple occasions. I'm just kidding.
Any final things we needed to throw in there? Or are we good?
No.
I think we're good. All right, guys. with that, on behalf of John Nash and Jason Cruz, I'm Paul Gift, and keep doing business as usual. Thanks.